This past weekend, Vista Outdoors made a public announcement that they have come to an agreement for the sale of their ammo branch as well as their outdoor branch as two separate things for $3.2 billion. Now, the cost is not what I'm concerned about, and I've made a few videos, but I think it is incredibly important that this message get out, because if you look at who they are selling to, now I want you to keep in mind, Vista Outdoors is the largest, by far the biggest civilian ammo producer in all of the Northern Hemisphere, by far. In America, there is nobody that produces more civilian ammo than Vista Outdoors. It includes brands like Federal. It can go on and on. You just can't replace it. It is almost as if it is a monopoly. Now, I know there's some smaller ammo producers, but if you take Vista Outdoors out of the equation, really the only large ammo producer for civilians at that point is the federal government. Here's the problem, and I want to take a moment, and I really want to implore you to watch this video, listen to what I'm about to say, and please share it with your local government representatives to block the sale of Vista Outdoors to the Czech group out of the Czech Republic. Now, if the Czech group was just some company out of the Czech Republic, I would still be worried, but it goes beyond that, because the Czech group, being in the Czech Republic, and I just want to kind of put a scenario in your head here. If for some reason the U.S. became a tyrannical government, like we had somebody in charge who was causing tyranny, or we had some sort of external government dominating our government, and all there was left was the citizens, the only two sources of ammunition we have is Vista Outdoors and the federal government coming out of Lake City Ammo Plant, the U.S. Army ammo manufacturing plant in Independence, Missouri. If the government didn't want the civilians to have ammo, they'd stop it. And then if they also didn't want us to have civilian ammo from Vista Outdoors, all they would have to do is reach out to the Czech Republic and say, hey, we're not going to give you the billions of dollars we give you on a regular basis if you continue to supply ammo to our civilians. And they're going to stop. They're just simply going to stop. That's a problem in itself, but that's kind of a what if scenario. Let's take a moment and talk about who the Czech group really is. And keep in mind, as I talk about who the Czech group is, they will, as far as what has been agreed upon at this point, they will be controlling all civilian ammo in the U.S. with the exception of the small manufacturers. It'll be this group out of the Czech Republic controlling our ammo. But who are they? Well, the Czech group used to be a part of a group called the Excalibur group. So, what's the Excalibur group? Well, the Excalibur group used to be part of what was referred to as the Excalibur Army. Well, what's the Excalibur Army? Goodness gracious. Well, the Excalibur Army was part of the communist Czechoslovakian group of people who, when the wall fell in the early 90s, the Excalibur Army rounded up all of those Russian weapons, all of them. And we're talking about nuclear weapons. We're talking about ballistic missiles. We're talking about ballistic missile systems. We're talking about all sorts of weapon systems. And if you remember, I want to kind of poke your memory here, because you remember it. Remember when the wall fell in the early 90s, how all those Russian weapons just missing? Where'd they go? Where'd they go? All these Russian weapons, all these Russian nukes. Where did they go when the USSR fell? Well, groups like the Excalibur Army acquired all those weapons and they sold them to the highest bidder. That's what they did. They sold them to the highest bidder, whether they were terrorist groups, whether they were communist groups, whether they weren't. Like, they just, whoever was the highest bidder, they sold it to them, and that's how they gained their empire. They gained their empire by selling stolen weapons from the USSR, and now they have become they went from being the Excalibur Army to the Excalibur Group to now the Czech Group. And that's who is buying Vista Outdoors. I mean, just think about that for a second. Not only do they control, if this sale was to go through, not only would they control the largest ammo manufacturer in America, they currently control the largest civilian ammo manufacturer in Europe as well. So ultimately what you'd have is you would have this group that formerly sold stolen weapons from the USSR to the highest bidder and made billions doing that, that they will control all of the American civilian ammo as well as the European civilian ammo. I mean, just let that sink in for a little bit. Just let that sink in for a little bit. The sale of Vista Outdoors to the Czech Group, otherwise known as Excalibur Group, otherwise known as Excalibur Army, has to stop. It has to stop. It is very important that you share this with your local representation, your federal representation. It has to stop. I mean, and really all this is doing is it's feeding the pockets of the shareholders of Vista Outdoors. And that's all they care about at this point. That's all. I mean, they care about their own pocketbook. But what's really going to happen to our civilian ammo is everything in the Northern Hemisphere is going to be controlled by one company. And it's not an American company. It's a Czechoslovakian company that not only is just a Czechoslovakian company, but it's the Excalibur Army. It has to stop. And that's the point of this. This is a dark insight into the reality of what's happening to our civilian ammo. This isn't just me making it up. Google the Excalibur Army. Google Czech Group. Google Excalibur Group. They're all the same thing. It's the same entity. It's the same entity. And they're going to control all civilian ammo in the Northern Hemisphere? Come on now. This has to stop.